Hey everyone, welcome to another Commander Deck Tech. This is going to be Commander Deck Tech number 2, officially. Today's commander is Cromat, and I'm in my tradition of giving very corny commander deck names. Today's deck's name will be Cromat's Winter Storm. It's a snow permanent themed deck. I've actually been wanting to build something like this for a while, and I figured, hey, I think a commander deck would be perfect. I very specifically did not try and find existing snow decks out there. I wanted to kind of build something the way I would do it, essentially. And in search of a commander, I wanted to pick a commander that was snow themed. Unfortunately, there are no ideal legendary snow creatures that have a lot of mana symbols in their cost, so Cromat was actually the closest I could come to in terms of a commander. So let's get on to Cromat, but before we do, actually, I'll debate you there. If you enjoy my content, I would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell right next to it down below on YouTube. That really goes a long way in terms of supporting the channel. It takes a few seconds for you, but for me and the YouTube algorithm, it says something. If you end up enjoying this video, which I hope you do, I would really appreciate you hitting that thumbs up button as well. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down button twice. That's perfectly within your right, of course. Either way, I appreciate your feedback as well in the comment section down below. Alright, so Cromat. Cromat's actually a pretty cool creature. In my search for a commander for this deck, I actually didn't even know or remember that Cromat existed. And when I found it and I saw the art and I just saw what it did, I was like, okay, that's it. I found what I was looking for. And most of the Cromat commander decks out there don't use snow, which I think was also interesting. I mean, of the little research that I did, that's the extent of it. And I noticed that they weren't actually using snow as a theme. So that's perfect. I'm hoping I'm one of the few doing this. So Cromat has 5 different abilities, all requiring different combinations of mana. So let's go through them really quick. So destroy target creature blocking or blocked by Cromat. Alright, so you got removal there. Your opponents are going to think twice before they block Cromat, that's for sure. Cromat gains flying until end of turn. So, a 5/5 flyer, potentially, at least at minimum. Regenerate Cromat, so that's great. You could attack in, and worst case, you could always regenerate it instead of it dying. Cromat gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Alright. And of course, you can do that multiple times. Just keep that in mind. And put Cromat on top of its owner's library, giving it some evasion. So, that's a lot. Now, obviously, you need to be producing different types of mana, and this deck does that. But I really think that Cromat's actually a pretty cool commander, a pretty nice finisher in a way, and it's not just there kind of supporting the rest of your deck, it's actually a threat in and of itself, and that's what I really like about Cromat. And of course the art is pretty much on theme with the rest of the deck, although it's not a snow permanent. Unfortunately, that would have been perfect, but like I said, I think this is as close as I'm going to get building a 5-color snow deck like I have here. Alright, so the finishers, or at least what I'm calling the finishers. All the creatures are pretty cool in this deck, I think. But the finishers are the ones that can get really, really big, and that can deal a decent amount of damage, in one swing. So that's why I kind of grouped them all into what I call the finishers. Starting with Abominable Treefolk, Trample. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of snow permanents you control. Now, the majority of the permanents in this deck are snow permanents. Almost all of your lands are snow lands in one way or another. All your creatures, or almost all your creatures, are snow permanents. The only things that aren't really snow permanents are some enchantments and artifacts that are kind of like staples of Commander that I had to include to just make this deck, curve out well. But majority of your permanents are snow creatures. So Abominable Treefolk, by the time it's turn 4, it's going to be, at the very least, a 5/5 with Trample. And that's at the very least. Odds are it'll be much bigger, and that's what I really like about it. So it's a really cool creature to have. A Rhymeskill Dragon, at 7 mana, has flying. Tap target creature and put an ice counter on it. Creatures with ice counters on them don't untap during their controller's untap steps. So you can use that ability many times and start taking out creatures without actually having to destroy them, which is nice. You get around indestructibility and other forms of evasion, and it's a 5/5 flyer just swinging in every turn. So, that's just awesome. Don't know what else to say. And it's a snow creature, which is pretty cool. Phyrexian Snow Crusher, It basically has to attack each turn. We've seen this before in other creatures. It also has an ability. For 1 colorless and 1 snow mana, Phyrexian Snow Crusher gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So you can do this multiple times. It doesn't have trample, but there is another way to give it trample within this deck. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's a threat that essentially has to attack every turn. So it's one of those threats where you don't have to feel bad attacking your friends. Or like, listen, I got to do what the card tells me to do. So there we go. So the next 2 cards, Merit Lage's Slumber and Dark Depths, essentially the goal is to create a 20/20 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible. Now, what's cool about Merit Lage's Slumber is that, like I said before, almost all your permanents are snow permanents. So to get to 10 snow permanents, not really hard. You're gonna get there really quick. So you don't necessarily have to rush this out turn 2, but you could. And pretty soon you're gonna get to 10, and then boom, you get a 20/20 flying indestructible creature, which is quite honestly perfect. It's not a snow permanent in and of itself, the token that's created, but whatever. I mean, who cares at that point? You have a 20/20 flyer. So I'm also including a land in here, Dark Depths, obviously. So you start removing counters from it, and once all the counters are gone, you get to create a 20/20 black avatar creature token with flying indestructible. So same thing. What's cool is that this deck allows you to do it twice. So if the first one gets destroyed for whatever reason or you can't get to it, you have a backup with Dark Depths, which I think is pretty cool. And of course, it's a 20/20 flyer. The game's not going to last that much longer if your friends can't take care of it. Hailstorm Valkyrie, a flying trample 2/2 for 4, and it has for 2 snow mana. Hailstorm Valkyrie gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So you could do that multiple times. So, turn 5, let's say you get this out on curve, turn 5, you can make it a 6/6, at least. It has flying trample, so it's just swinging in there. It has trample, so even if your opponents have, other flyers, as long as they're smaller than 6/6, you're going to trample over. A very nice creature to have, and you could also use its ability to give it some evasion if your friends are trying to remove it using damage-based spells or whatever. Ascendant Spirit, another nice new addition that we got with Kaldheim. It's another creature that you invest snow mana into, and it gets bigger and more scary as you invest more mana into it. The most interesting or the most important ability is this third ability for 4 mana, because you could use that ability as many times as you want. So you could just get bigger and bigger and bigger every turn. So Ascendant Spirit becomes a huge threat if your friends can't get rid of it. Conifer Worm is awesome. I completely missed this during Modern Horizons. So it's a 4/4 trample for 5, okay? But for 4 mana, not even snow mana, not that would have been a problem, Conifer Worm gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of snow permanents you control. Okay, so like I said, that's probably already going to be +5/+5. And there's no restriction on this, so if you have access to 8 mana, yeah, you're going to do it twice. And there's ways to get even more mana in this deck, so Conifer Worm can come down, and if your friends can't deal with it, you could probably start one-shotting people. So Conifer Worm is super, super awesome. Like, I guess I understand why it's an uncommon within Modern Horizons, but I really love Conifer Worm. Icebreaker Kraken. So this spell costs 1 less to cast for each snow land you control. So again, it's going to be vastly cheaper than 12 mana, obviously. When it enters the battlefield, artifacts and creatures target opponent controls don't untap during that player's next untap step. And you could return 3 snowlands you control to your hand, essentially. And you could return Icebreaker Kraken to its owner's hand. Not necessarily something you're often going to be using, but you could. What I really like about this is just it's an 8/8. Now, it doesn't have trample or flying, which is unfortunate, but you could ideally give it some form of evasion through other effects in this deck. I just think it's an awesome creature, and you could get it down for very, very, very cheap. Diamond Fairy. Alright, Diamond Fairy for 5 mana, has flying, and for 1 colorless and a snow mana, snow creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So not Diamond Fairy. All your snow creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and you could do this multiple times. So this also becomes another scary creature to have on the battlefield. And if your friends can't take care of it, essentially the minute it comes down, next turn you're probably going to start dealing some very, very serious damage to, your least favorite friend at the table. So Diamond Fairy is also another awesome creature. Chilling Shade, flying for 3 mana. It's a 1/1. Chilling Shade gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Alright. Very similar effect. What's cooler is that it's the +1/+1 buff. You can do multiple times, and it's only 1 snow mana. So, you know, let's say he gets down on curve, turn 4. If this is your only creature, you can give it +4/+4, if my math is correct, at least. And it has flying, so it's a 5/5 flyer the next turn it's out, which is pretty decent. Yeah, again, pretty cool creature. You can see that this is a very common theme amongst all these creatures, which I think is also very nice. Rime Feather Owl, flying. It's 7 mana, so it's a bit pricey. Rime Feather Owl's permanent power and toughness are each equal to a number of snow permanents in play. Granted, you'll probably be the only one playing snow permanents, but very similar to Abominable Treefolk, but it has flying, which I think is way better than Trample in many instances, in most instances, I should say. So, yeah, at least a 7/7? No, sorry, it would be at least an 8/8 flyer. And it has other abilities too, which is kind of crazy. Put an ice counter on target permanent. Permanents with ice counters on them are snow permanents. So you can start, you can start converting your friends' permanents into snow permanents, and boom, Rime Feather gets even bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's its own form of buffing, essentially, and it's kind of it's a permanent buff in this instance. So, yeah, I mean, this is just an awesome bird creature. I really love it. I think it's really awesome to have in this type of deck. All right, so the other threats, mostly, all snow creatures as well. They're not, I didn't consider them finishers per se. They're more support, but, they could be finishers for all intents and purposes. Starting with Chiller Pillar, which I think is a kind of funny name. So it's a 3/3 for 4, and it also has Monstrosity for 6. Monstrosity 2, so you become a 5/5. And as long as it's monstrous, it has flying. So a 5/5 flyer. A 5/5 flying insect. That's kind of scary. So I thought that was pretty cool. It could be a finisher in its own right. Blizzard Spectre. A flying specter. Looks like a dragon, but whatever. That's not my area of expertise. Whenever Blizzard Spectre deals combat damage to a player, choose one. That player returns a permanent he or she controls to its owner's hand. That player discards a card. Pretty brutal. Your friends will not like you. If you can get in every turn to deal damage, you're going to be having a lot of fun. I just think it's a fun snow creature to have. Avalanche Caller. For 2 mana, it's a 1/3. You can pay 2, colorless, target snow land you control, becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with hexproof and haste until end of turn. It's still a land. So you can create hexproof 4/4 elemental creatures out of your lands until end of turn. Which is pretty cool. I mean, if you are short on threats and you need some extra threats, you can create them. Or you can use threats, or you can convert your lands into 4/4 creatures to act as blockers to kind of stop an attack on the way, on the other way. So I don't know, Avalanche Caller, I thought was a pretty cool auto include here. A Darkar Valkyrie, yeah, I said that right. For 6 mana, flying vigilance, awesome. And you can tap it when target creature other than a Darkar Valkyrie dies this turn. Return that creature to the battlefield under your control. Alright, so you could save your own creatures, or you could steal one of your friend's creatures, which is pretty darn awesome. And the fact that it has vigilance is that, it could attack every turn, and you could also use its ability if need be. So this is just an awesome creature, and the fact that it's a snow creature is just like a bonus. Icefang Coatl kind of feels, a lot weaker in a commander format, but I thought it really had to be included in a deck that's sporting all snow creatures. It has flash, has flying, as long as you have 3 other snow permanents in play, which is kind of a joke most of the time. It has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. So I think overall, a pretty decent creature to have. Cantrips, and it has Death Touch, so it can act as removal last minute without your opponent seeing it coming. So, yeah, I really like Icefang Coatl, and there is a way to get it back. So, let's keep that in mind as we go through this deck. Mortide of the Frost, Changeling. Alright, interesting. You may have Mortide of the Frost enter the battlefield as a copy of a permanent you control, except it's a legendary and snow in addition to its other types, and it's a creature. And if it's a creature, it enters it with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it, and has Changeling. Alright, so you could start doing some pretty crazy shenanigans with Mortide of the Frost, which is why I thought it just absolutely had to be included in here. You can duplicate another creature or basically anything you want, really. And, you know, maybe finish the game much more quickly. So I think this is a really, really awesome and no-brainer to have. It's also a snow creature. Whatever it's, you know, coming as a copy of is going to be a snow permanent. So, yeah. Again, an auto-include kind of no-brainer here, and you could do so many things with it, which I think is really awesome. Narfi Betrayer King. Other snow and zombie random creatures you control get +1/+1. So kind of a lord for your snow creatures. For three snow mana, return Narfi from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this is one of those creatures that just won't die unless it gets removed from your graveyard, because you could keep bringing it back over and over and over again for relatively cheap cost, just 3 snow mana. So yeah, it's a buff to all your creatures, and why would you not? You could keep bringing it back, like I said, for pretty cheap. You don't need to attack with it. It just needs to be present to buff up everything else, which is perfect. Orin Frostfang. Attacking creatures you control have Death Touch. Alright. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Alright. Well, you got plenty of flyers in this deck and trampling creatures in this deck. So, you know, your opponents are going to have to deal with death touching creatures as your creatures are attacking. And if they decide not to block, well, you're going to be drawing a ton of cards. So, I really love this creature. It's really, really awesome. Really awesome snake to have. Orin Viper. Another snake. Cool. Whenever Orin Viper deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature at the end of combat. So, basically, death touch. Whenever Orin Viper deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. You notice anything? You notice anything that's similar here? So it's a 1/3 as opposed to a 2/6 for Orin Frostfang, which is kind of interesting there. It would have been nicer if Orin Frostfang was 6 mana just to make it consistent, but I'm happy it's 5. But it actually essentially has the same effects, but just on it. Whereas Orin Frostfang gives it to all your creatures, which is pretty awesome. But, you know, if Orin Frostfang is not on the battlefield, at least you have Orin Viper instead. So either way, it works out. Spirit of the Aldergard. Whenever Spirit of the Aldergard enters the battlefield, search your library for a snow land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Spirit of Aldergard gets +1/+0 for each other snow permanent you control. Alright, well, the land you can get is Dark Depths, because it is a snow land. So keep that in mind. If you're not stuck on any particular colors, you can go get Dark Depths, which is a very nice way to tutor for it. And it gets +1/+0 for each other snow permanent you control. So it's going to be at least a 4/4, probably more as time goes on. So it becomes a big, big creature, and you just start attacking in with it. It doesn't have trample or anything, but that's okay. It's still a big creature that, you know, your opponents are going to have to deal with. The utility creatures, these are a mix of snow and non-snow, but mostly snow, except for Eternal Witness, basically. So, Draugr Necromancer, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it. Instead, you may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent's own with ice counters on them, and you may spend mana from snow sources as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. So, kind of like an Arkham's Astrolabe effect there. Pretty darn cool, so every time a non-token creature dies, you probably can cast it at some point in the future, assuming you have enough mana for it. Don't care about the colors, but you just have to have enough mana, which is another way. As you can see, there's kind of a sub-theme here. You can steal your opponent's creatures when they die. So that's, I think, a pretty cool effect. Definitely going to be annoying in Commander, and can also be very lethal in Commander. So I think Draugr Necromancer is pretty awesome. Your Eternal Witness, only really here to get snow permanents back from your graveyard that may have been destroyed or lost for whatever reason. Main reason why it's there, I didn't see a reason to not play Eternal Witness. Jorn, God of Winter. I'm not really playing Jorn, God of Winter for him. I'm playing him for Culdering the Rime Staff instead. Although Jorn could be valid depending on what's currently on the battlefield. But what I really want is Culdering the Rime Staff. So you may tap it. You may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield tapped. Alright, so most of your cards are permanents, and most of them are snow permanents. So this is insane in this deck. You can get back essentially any creature, any snow creature that's died, you can get back every turn, one every turn, for 3 mana. That's amazing. It's amazing. I was using Ice Fan Coatl as an example, but you can get anything back that's a snow. So yeah, this is your opponents have to answer this artifact when it comes onto the battlefield, because if they don't, you're just going to keep getting your best card back every turn from your graveyard. And yeah, it's entering the battlefield tapped. Who cares if it's tapped? You're getting it back. So Cauldering the Ram Staff is just awesome here. Pilfering Hawk. Flying for 1 snow, draw a card and discard a card. Putting it here as kind of like a looting effect. Can come in handy when you want to start cycling through cards and you're looking for an answer or a land. So Pilfering Hawk is pretty cool. Frost Augur. For 1 snow, look at the top card of your library. If it's a snow card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Like I said, a majority of your cards are snow cards, so you know oftentimes you can get a pretty good hit rate with Frost Augur, and that's just nice. Extra card draw for the most part. Iceberg Cantrix. Whenever another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target player put the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So I just thought this was cute. Honestly, it is Commander, so you know. Getting one of your friends to mill 2 cards every turn is not the biggest thing in the world, but I just thought it would be a cool effect. You could probably replace this with something else if you didn't like it, but I wanted it there. I mean, it could come in handy. At the worst case, it's annoying, and that's my style anyway. Alright, so we're off creatures. Let's get to the ramp and mana fixing. These are mostly non-snow permanents or non-snow spells. Arkham's Astrolabe is kind of a no-brainer here, though. Very, very powerful in this deck. So, yeah, Arkham's Astrolabe, just kind of a must here. Arcane Signet, I think we all understand why. Glittering Frost. What's cool about Glittering Frost is an enchanted land is a snow. So for the few lands that are not snow lands, they become snow lands now. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 additional mana of any color. So you are ramping yourself into the future. Very cool. Ramping Growth, we all know what that does. Soul Ring, we all know what that does. Expedition Map, to get basically any land you want. Dark Depths being one of the main, you know, but it could be anything, really, that you need at any given time. Sculptor of Winter, untap target snow land. It's useless here. I mean, sorry, it's useful here. Oh boy, I don't know if that was a Freudian slip or not. Yeah, it could be useful here. This is something you could probably, you know, swap with something else. I do have some cards in this deck that you can swap, but I wanted to play it. It's really the only format you're going to be able to play it, so I wanted to include in this deck. Replicating Ring, basically future ramping yourself, which I think is really cool. It's a snow artifact, so, you know, that also counts. It's a snow permanent, which is going to, you know, affect a lot of your other creatures and spells. And again, I think it's pretty much very on theme. Mirari's Wake, I couldn't do without it. I really wanted it in this deck, so Mirari's Wake. Kodama's Reach, yes, we all know why. Exploration, we all know why. And Cultivate, well, we all know why. This is all about ramping here. Boreal Druid, add 1 to your mana pool. It is a snow creature, main reason why it's included, because it's also going to count as a snow permanent. And it's, you know, it's a mana dork, so very useful. And remember, it creates snow mana. Even though it's saying add 1 colorless, it's also snow mana. So it is a snow permanent. Crop Rotation, yeah, I mean, yes, you could get technically any land you want here, but realistically, you're going for Dark Depths. Chromatic Lantern, very important, obviously, for a deck that's playing 5 colors. And Centaur Omen Reader, oh boy, almost misread that, Omen Reader. As long as Centaur Omen Reader is tapped, creature spells you play cost 2 less to play. This is a risky creature to play, but I really like it because if you do manage to get a tap through attacking or some other effect, it does help you ramp your other spells, your creature spells essentially, for as long as it is tapped. So yeah, you know, something you attack with every turn, you know, it's going to get bigger from other effects you have in this deck, and if it survives that attack, you can cast a creature spell or a few creature spells in your second main phase for much cheaper, which is very, very important. Alright, the removal. You know, the removal, this is something, again, I want to stick to snow as much as possible, so feel free to not, you know, use any of these if you don't like them. This is just what I wanted to play, what I felt I wanted to play. You know, Commander, you can essentially play any card you want in Magic, so take these with a grain of salt. This is what I preferred. but, you know, feel free to change if you want. Scred, I just like Scred. You know, you can deal 10 damage to a creature pretty easily. On Thin Ice, a nice way to remove creatures as well. Frostbite, I just thought it was cool. Again, one of the few places you can play Frostbite, so I figured I'd include it. But realistically, you'd probably want to swap that for something else. But it is a snow spell, which is relevant. Snow Sorcery up next, Blizzard Brawl. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you control 3 or more snow permanents, which is a joke, the creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible end of turn. Those creatures fight each other. So use this as basically removal. Almost always going to have 3 snow permanents on the battlefield, so yeah, use it wisely. Blood on the Snow. Choose 1. Destroy all creatures. Destroy all planeswalkers. Alright, pretty brutal. Then return a creature or planeswalker card with a current mana cost X or less from the graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast this spell. So let's say you're down on your luck. All your creatures are gone. You could essentially board wipe, and then bring one of those creatures back, or a planeswalker. It's really up to you. You could also destroy all planeswalkers. We don't play any planeswalkers in this deck, so they'll never really hit you. And you can take out whatever blood planeswalkers that are causing you grief in whatever game. So I like this spell because it gives you some options, and it has a really cool secondary effect as well. Priest of the Haunted Edge. Tap. Sacrifice Priest of the Haunted Edge. Target creature gets -X/-X on end of turn, where X is the number of snowlands you control. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So you can only do this on your turn during main phases, but it is essentially removal that gets around indestructible, which I think is cool and important. And it is a snow permanent, so again, adding to the effects. Up next, Winter's Rest, another snow enchantment. Whenever Winter's Rest enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. As long as you control another snow permanent, enchanted creature doesn't untap during its untap step. So if there's a creature you really don't like, you use Winter's Rest on it, or you could use it on your Omen Reader that we just covered before and keep it tapped, and then all your creatures are permanently going to be 2 less to cast. So there's a few ways to use Winter's Rest. Pretty cool. Tundra Fumarole. Tundra Fumarole does 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Add a colorist for each snow spent to cast this spell. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Alright, so you're almost certainly going to be casting this for 3 snow, so you're going to be getting 3 mana back. Yeah, why not? I mean, very, very useful. It's essentially free in your deck. So, pretty cool. Source of Plowshares, we know that. Path to Exile, we all know that. Dreadbore, I just wanted to play Dreadbore because I could. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, it hits both, so I like that. And Cyclonic Rift, well, I think all Commander freaks know what Cyclonic Rift is. I really like it because it works really well in this in this deck, so why not? Let's play it. Alright, so then there's the rest. Just 3 cards. Blessing of Frost, I don't know where to put these by the way. Distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of creatures you control, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast a spell. Alright, so 4. Then draw cards for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So hopefully you draw a lot of cards. Blessing of Frost is pretty awesome here. You don't do it early game, you do it mid to late game, and it's just a blowout for the most part because you're drawing a ton of cards. You're boosting your creature's power. It's perfect. Rime Transfusion, another snow enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +2/+1 and has an ability. Snow, this creature can't be blocked this turn except by snow creatures. So essentially unblockable, because I'm sure none of your friends are playing snow decks or snow creatures. So Rime Transfusion giving your creatures evasion, which is awesome. Graven Lore, I really love Graven Lore. Scry X, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast a spell, then draw 3 cards. So you are going to be scrying 5, almost always. Scrying through 5 cards is pretty darn good, even in Commander. And then you're drawing 3. So if those 5 cards are all useless, boom, gone, good. Go to the bottom of your deck, and then draw 3 fresh cards blindly. Or you get rid of 2 cards you really don't want, and you draw the other 3. So Graven Lore is really awesome, really, really powerful. I wish I could play more in Commander. Alright, so the lands, we'll go through this really quickly. Again, the lands, this deck was made to be fun to play, not necessarily the most competitive, and I think that's what most of us want. We want decks that are fun to play. Another thing I should mention here, I calculated about half the value of this deck is in the lands, no surprise. You can cut down on that by like $200-300 just by getting rid of like all the fetches. You get rid of all the fetches, and the deck's cost goes down by half. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I included fetches in here for it to be the most, efficient, or one of the as efficient as it can be. But you don't need to play with all the fetches, and there are alternatives to the fetches, which I'll get to. So just keep that in mind. This deck can be much cheaper if you just cut the fetches that we're going to see in a few seconds. Scrying Sheets. Really cool snow land. So, okay, fine, you can tap it for 1 snow mana, that's cool. For 1 colorless and a snow, look at the top card of your library. If that card is a snow, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So this is the second effect that we have in this deck. Again, really cool. It's going to often hit, so very, very powerful. Faceless Haven, add 1 colorless, cool. For 3 snow mana, Faceless Haven becomes a 4/3 creature with vigilance, and all creature types until end of turn is still a land. So mostly here because it's a snow permanent. It's a land as well. It produces a colorless snow mana. And worst case, you can make a creature out of it, but most of the time, you don't need to. Dark Depths, we already went through that. Command Tower, obviously. Now, everything else on this screen, at least, are all the new dual lands, snow dual lands that we got. They all come into play tapped, which sucks. They're going to slow you down a bit. But they're all snow lands, and they produce all the colors that we need in this deck, so they're musts. And they all cost like 50 cents, so it's perfect. Alright, then we got Blood Crypt. This is kind of random. Blood Crypt you could remove for whatever you want, but I was just kind of trying to round out the colors properly, make sure all my mana was being produced, all the colors that I needed was being produced properly. But you can choose to not play Blood Crypt. That was just my choice. Then we got all the fetches. Again, you get rid of these fetches, you can replace them with some cheaper alternatives that we'll get to, and boom, this deck becomes very, very affordable. There are also some other cards you can cut in here that you don't necessarily need, and the deck still works really well. The actual snow cards, they're all relatively cheap, which is what I really loved about the deck that I put together. And of course you have all the basics. You're playing a ton of basics, so nothing crazy here. And the budget options I really want to go through. So Evolving Wilds, Ash Barrens, Terramorphic Expanse are all replacements for some of the fetches that I've been playing in this deck. You can also cut a land and play Werefarer's Bauble. And I mean, this is Commander, so you could think of like a trillion other effects that are fetch-like effects that you can put in here and get rid of the fetches. So you don't really need the fetches, but if you want to play, if you're at least semi-competitive in your group, play with the fetches. If you have them, then there's no reason not to play with them. So yeah, that's Cromat's Winter Storm deck. Tell me what you think. This is again, this is still new territory for me in terms of Commander, but yeah, I really had fun putting this deck together. Let me tell you, spent a couple of weeks perfectly selecting all the cards. Some cards I know I could do better on, but I want to play it the way I want to put it together, the way I would play it, right now. So yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow me on Twitter and Facebook. All that stuff really helps me out a lot. Sharing my content on social media really goes a long way. Reddit, whatever it is, really, really, really helps me out. I would be eternally grateful if you think my content, of course, is worth sharing. If you want to go a step further and support me on Patreon, check out the Patreon link in the description of this video. My community is slowly growing. I really, I love that slow growth, slow but steady growth. Check out the tiers. Basically, you get part of your money back at the end of every year in the form of magic cards, and that's going to be very important going on to 2022. There are going to be some big changes, and when you become a patron, you'll see what I mean. But yeah, check that out in the description of this video. Thanks, and have a